All right, everybody, we're back. So welcome to the July 1st, 2015 edition of the professional VMware.com vBrownbag. So tonight we're going to continue with our VCP6 series with Mike Wilson. He's going to be talking troubleshooting. Just some show notes. You can join in on the conversation using the vBrownbag hashtag. You can also go to the GoToMeeting window to ask questions or leave comments. Also remember, we have other podcasts going on globally, so check those out. You can also download the shows via iTunes or from professionalvmware.com. Also keep in mind, we have the Tech Talks going on at VMworld this year, so go check out the link and sign up, both for US and EMEA. Your guest speaker tonight is Mike Wilson. You can find him on Twitter at IT_muscle. I'm your host, Ahmad Yunus. You can find me on Twitter at Ahmad_Yunus. And with that, I am going to pass. Let's see, there's a lot of people on here. Whoa, a lot of presenters. Mike, where are you? Mike Wilson, there you go. All you.
All right, let's see if I think that is the monitor I want to see. Can everybody see my presentation there?
Yes, can see.
Right.
Yep, good.
Excellent. All right. I was kind of given short notice for this, so I do apologize for the brevity of this. Feel free to go ahead and throw out as many questions as you want. I can't guarantee that I will answer them or I can answer them, but I will try. As mentioned before, I'm Mike Wilson on Twitter at ITMuscle. I also have a blog at it-muscle.com where I'm going over the Delta objectives right now. And tonight we are going to go over section 6, which is troubleshooting. So let's go ahead and get into that. So the objectives we're going to go over tonight happen to be general troubleshooting and steps and log locations, reviewing common storage, network and VM issues, including resource contention and identifying when virtual machines don't have access to enough resources. We're going to go over some common VM constraints, and we're going to review monitoring and logging in the vSphere web client. All right, so going ahead and getting started on it. We're also going to have some resources here. Anybody who wants or needs the slide deck after this, there's not a whole lot of them. Feel free to go ahead and reach out to me, and I can make them available. They have the resource list here. So general troubleshooting and log locations. So we went ahead and installed this new vSphere 6, and we have it all up and running now. As IT people, though, we know that things are going to go bad at some point. There are going to be things that happen that we're not quite sure why, and we're going to have to troubleshoot them, and we're going to have to figure out exactly what's going on to try to fix it. We're going to look at tonight where we look in order to solve these problems, and we're going to start by defining a methodology. If we don't have a methodology, it's going to be difficult to go ahead and keep track of all the things that we've tried. So we're going to basically have 3 things that we need to do no matter where the problem lies. These are just general troubleshooting steps. Number 1 is identifying the problem. We need to know how do we know that we have a problem. It's not, possibly not easy to define. Don't have, for instance, like a hard drive that just goes out or something like that. It may be a little bit more difficult to describe or to quantify. Something such as, say, the TPS memory is not as high as it should be. One thing that you need to keep doing is writing all these things down. All administrators keep good notes and documentation. We know that how many times have we gone into new places and new jobs and have had absolutely zero documentation, and we have to go ahead and spend probably the first couple months just figuring out where everything is. Also, if we are not the ones that are actually experiencing the problem, if it's not our environment, Asking questions is always important. What is the expected behavior? What are they actually seeing? Is the task ending in an error? If there is an error, what is it, and what does it go ahead and point to? Does it happen consistently or just once in a while? Is it something we can reproduce? And most importantly, my favorite one, what has changed recently? Everyone on the phones that go ahead and call in for troubleshooting will always just about say nothing. And then after about 2-3 hours into the troubleshooting process, oh, by the way, we did do this. And then it turns out invariably to be the actual issue. So the next thing we need to do is define the problem. We've identified all the symptoms, and we can actually define and name the problem. And now we need to see what areas is this affecting. Is this affecting a particular VM, or is it affecting hardware? This allows us to be able to go back later and explain it either to the person who this environment belongs to, or even to upper management. Also, knowing what areas and hardware is affected allows us to narrow the error down to a smaller attack area, and then you can go ahead and divide that up and work on solutions one at a time. Is it a misconfiguration? Is the components or software incompatible with each other? Once you've narrowed it down, we can work on the next stage, which is testing solutions. We know what the problem is. We need to formulate a plan of attack and go ahead and try it. Something as simple as replacing a hard drive is possible. Sometimes we have a little bit more complex solution that needs to be implemented. Once again, you want to make sure you document all these solutions and all the things that you try. If we don't document it, then there's a good possibility of, one, we can't go back if that didn't fix it, and two, we may try it again, or somebody else may try it again if they're introduced to the process as well. If we don't go back to the previous setting, if it doesn't work, we could actually be causing more problems down the road. So if you can possibly even have a second implementation of it somewhere to see what the settings and that are supposed to look like, and then maybe we can mimic the good system. All right, so next, logs. Logs are extremely important, and they're also very, very useful. VMware has a number of products even that will go ahead and allow us to aggregate all the logs together. They have Log Insight. They have a whole suite of operations manager that allows us to go ahead and use these logs to go ahead and collect statistics over time over all the different objects in our environment. So the number of different ways we can go ahead and view the logs is we can go ahead and view the logs in the DCUI, or for those of us that aren't familiar with that, that is the console if we're sitting there right in front of the machine. We can also go into the DCUI and enable the shell, which will go ahead and give us a Linux-like prompt, and we can go ahead and do that and scroll through the logs there. We can also SSH into the machine itself. We can go ahead and use a web browser. We can export, such as a VM support using the web client or the C# client. We can also view logs themselves in the web client. So underneath VMware, while it's running, the majority of the logs are going to be located in the var log directory. There are some that are going to be a little bit more spread out. If you have vCenter on Windows, they'll be in a little bit different location, and of course vCenter has its own set of logs as well. If you go ahead and decide to go ahead and create a VM support, there's going to be a decent amount of logs and folders available for you to go ahead and peruse and go through. Including in this, you could have multiple hosts, you can have vCenter logs, and some of the other products that are included in your environment. Some of the more useful, depending on what we're looking at, we'll go ahead and bring up a picture here of what a VM support will look like. If we go ahead and bring it up, this is just a simple host. Some of the more interesting and useful folders that we're looking at there are the command and the var logs. The commands are redirected console commands that can go ahead and tell you all sorts of things about your environment, down from the firmware that you're running for the particular components in your system, all the way to your vSwitch setup and so forth. Your var logs are going to have wonderful files such as your VM kernel and VMK warning logs. These are really verbose, and they pretty much tell you as much as possible about what's going on in your environment. You do any sort of thing such as simple as a vMotion, and it will go ahead and list a whole number of things about it. It'll tell you that when it started, it'll tell you how much bandwidth was used during the copy process and when it ended. They're all going to be pretty useful depending on what you're troubleshooting. So this brings us to the first tempting of fate, and that is going to be our live demo. We're just basically going to go through and look at our ESXi health monitor and export information. Let's see here. Easiest way for me to show this.
Do you also talk about some products actually you can export a support bundle right from the UI?
Go ahead and export from the UI as far as the web client and that, or?
Yeah, so you got your vCenter, and I think, isn't there a, at least VMware did have a product where you can just download, and it was a plugin to vCenter, and it was support right there, and you can just basically click the button and it would send the logs or export the logs, stuff like that.
I wasn't actually aware of that.
Yeah, that's the VMware support assistant.
Yeah, VMware support.
All right, give me just a second here.
Are we having technical difficulties?
We may have presenter difficulties.
Oh, okay. So is that part of the troubleshooting?
That could be very well part of the troubleshooting. That's layer 8 right there.
Between the chair and the keyboard?
Yes.
Graham is on a roll tonight, buddy.
All right. First thing we're going to do here is we're going to export the logs out, and we can do that in the C# client just by going ahead and clicking on export and then export system logs. This will go ahead and allow us to say exactly everything that we want included in the logs. It'll also go ahead and allow us to gather performance data. Choose the location of where it actually sits, or where we want it to download to. And it'll go ahead and start that. And while we're waiting on that, is there any questions that are out there?
No questions in the window. And no questions on the Twitters. So, no more awkward silence.
No, I love the awkward silences.
Okay, how about you minimize this and go on while we wait for this to happen?
All right. Moving on. Common issues. So the next thing we're going to take a look at here are a number of issues that we can run into with storage. For example, we could run into things as simple as space issues, or we're not displaying the data store. We can also run into issues more to do with storage performance. Are things running as fast as we'd like them to be? Your disks may not have the performance or bandwidth needed for the tasks and the workloads that you're requesting of it, or the storage controller itself can't keep up. There could be any number of things that could be causing this. And of course, everything is rather interconnected to other areas as well. Is it really the speed of the disk array that's causing the problem, or can it be that the network itself can't keep up if you're, like for instance, working with an esxtop array? So you have to make sure that you're troubleshooting the correct areas. In the case of storage, you always want to start at the beginning, make sure that you have good connectivity to your storage. Then depending if it's fiber or esxtop storage, you can check, for instance, how it's zoned or your access control lists. So with performance issues, we can check a number of different areas. We can check logs, and we can also check ESXtop to see what kind of performance throughput we're seeing. And looking at the logs might give us a better idea of what your host is trying to do and why it's slowing down and what particular areas. For example, is it trying to do a lot of VM operations on a VMFS3 drive? If you're doing that, you might be using too many SCSI reservations for that, and too many of those will go ahead and start causing your performance to drop. If you're running into situations where your storage is seeing contention, you see an excessive amount of latency on the command or device side, and you can view all these either through ESXtop or remote ESXtop or through the web client in advanced charts. So in networking, where are we seeing the slowdown? The main things that we're kind of looking at with ESXtop there are our percent drop in transmit and our percent drop in receive, and the threshold is 1. So I mean, any drops at all is going to be a bad thing. First thing that we check with networking is it a physical problem? Are our switches having an issue? Are our cables having an issue? It could be something as simple as that. So CPU, what are we seeing? Where are we seeing the slowdown at? Is it on a strictly one VM, or is it host-wide, or is it even larger than that? We need to go ahead and localize exactly where the problem is lying, so that we can go ahead and better troubleshoot it. A few counters that we're looking at in the ESXtop tool at that point are our percent ready and also our co-stop. The percent ready is going to be when a VM has instructions to send to the CPU but is waiting for the CPU to be available to schedule the time with it. An excessive amount of time as this is with this metric is going to be an overloaded host. One of the things to keep in mind, though, with the percent ready is that it's going to be an aggregate of all of the CPUs. So if you have 10 virtual CPUs assigned to a host and you see 100% ready on it, you're going to have to divide that to see on an individual basis what you're actually seeing. The threshold is about 10% per vCPU that you want to keep it under. So the co-stop is going to be how long the VM is waiting for all the processors assigned to be available. So if you have four vCPUs assigned to it, it tries to go ahead and schedule all 4 of them at the same time. The amount of time that it needs to go ahead and wait to do this is that percent co-stop. And if it's higher than 3, perhaps you have too many virtual CPUs assigned to that particular VM. And one important side note, for which there's been many blogs written, adding more vCPUs does not increase the performance of your VM, always. A lot of times it can actually even go the other way and start causing issues. So memory. Again, where are we seeing the slowdown at? Is it, on a VM side, or is it on the host side, or even is it on multiple hosts? Is there programs that are consuming a large amount of it? And if so, what are those programs? We have a couple different metrics that we want to look at there, and one of them is going to be the MCTLSZ, which is going to be your memory ballooning in use. So when we start ballooning, what we're doing there is we're actually asking the VM tools driver to go ahead and start sucking memory back away from that VM to go ahead and try to use it in other areas. And the threshold for that is going to be 1. The other thing that we're taking a look at there is the SWCUR, and that is going to be your current swap rates. As we all know, anytime that you swap to disk, you're going to start slowing down quite drastically. So if we have any swapping going on at all, that's not typically something we want to see, and it's going to end up costing us performance. All right, so now, quite quickly, that brings us to the next live demo. Now this one, I have host up here, and I was just going to go ahead and take you through a couple of different metrics. And let's see here. What I have up here is just the base metrics that come up as soon as you go ahead and type in ESXtop. You can go ahead and change those at any time. If you hit your question mark there, that will go ahead and bring up all of the different interactive commands and all the different things you can go ahead and switch to. Like for instance, if I want to go ahead and check memory, this will go ahead and bring me back here and will tell me such interesting things as percent used, and here's my ready over here. Wrong one, memory, there we go. So here, our SWCUR, that's going to be our swap. We can go ahead and actually add fields to it as well. If you hit your F key, that goes ahead and brings up your fields. That goes ahead and allows us to add or take away fields and put them in different orders. It'll also give us a good idea of what exactly the fields mean. So for instance, our memory size, active memory, and the mem control, which is our ballooning file. You can also go ahead and look at our VMs, and here in my environment right now, I'm not running any. You can go ahead and switch over to disks, and this will show you on a controller level exactly what kind of usage you're having. You have your device average here and your kernel average. Any sort of large amount of issues on the device average, I didn't go over the actual thresholds, but they were in the slides there. If you have anything above about 20 on your device average, that may signify a problem with your SAN. What that is basically the command that you send over to the SAN. If it's taking more than 20 milliseconds to come back, this could signify some sort of issue. The K average is going to be your kernel average, and that's the amount of time it takes to go ahead and get the command out of the ESXi host itself. You have your more commonly seen reads and writes, and your megabyte reads and writes, and your commands, which is the queue depth. And of course, you have all of your different fields here as well. They've added some extra ones if you have it. If you have vSAN. I don't have vSAN enabled, but that is one of the new ones that is available as of 5.5 update 2. You also have your power states, and of course your network. And as mentioned before, you can have this is just your transfer here. If we go into fields, we have the drop packets, and as far as the transmit and the receive. All right, so I think that pretty much covers that one. That one went a little bit better than the first. All righty, moving on to 6.3. So common VM constraints, we've kind of gone over them a little bit. Anything that can or a lot of things that can happen to the host can also be on a more localized basis that are happening to the VM itself. The VM can go ahead and run into memory contention issues. It can go ahead and run into disk issues if the actual LUN itself is becoming overloaded. It can also go ahead and run into CPU issues if, for instance, you aren't going ahead and supplying it with enough vCPUs, or if you're supplying it with too much. That can go ahead and show up as a constraint from a VM. Some of the other things that you have to keep in mind is any special one-offs, such as, if you have RDMs, or if you have host caching that going on the VMs, or if you have GPU sharing going on that you have associated with it. Any of these things could go ahead and cause you to need to go ahead and bring up different ESXtop statistics, or possibly even look at the logs for that sort of thing. So the next one, we're going to go ahead, hopefully, and run through the web client here. So there's a couple of things that we can kind of look at here. And of course, if you're lucky enough to have Operations Manager, that's always an awesome tool to be able to have, or if you have Log Insight. Down here at the bottom, we have our log browser. And using that, we can go ahead and select an object in our environment, and then we can go ahead and actually retrieve those logs for it. And we can go ahead and apply filters to it. You'd think coming off of SSDs, they would be a little bit faster. I give that about 2 or 3 more seconds, and then I'm going to move to another area. All right, moving on. You can come over here, and one of the things that you can kind of take a look at is your performance. Now, if you go just under the overview, this is what VMware believes you to think is most important. And they'll go ahead and show you, like, for instance, ballooning on the memory, whether or not it's happening and how much of it. They'll show you CPU usage, and they'll show you disk usage and that. If you want to go further into it and actually specify the same sort of options that you had underneath the ESXtop, and that you can do that underneath the advanced. Go and click on that, go into the chart objects, and then you can go ahead and say, for instance, I want to take a look at a particular storage adapter. Go ahead and uncheck all of them except for the one I'm interested in. I can go ahead and check latency on it, and I can also have the option of saving these options if I want to go ahead and use it. Like, for instance, if I'm doing performance benchmarking, it would come in handy to go ahead and run the same thing over and over again on the different hosts. So that's where that might come into play. That way we can reproduce the same benchmarking. Once all said and done, go ahead and click OK, and that'll come up and give you a nice, beautiful graph, as well as your different statistics down there at the bottom. Of course, you can change your view based off of any of the others as well. If I change over to just CPU, this will go ahead and give me all the different objects there that if I were to go ahead into the chart objects, these are the things that, again, VMware believes are the most useful for me, and it will show me all of the different objects that it's managing for that particular performance statistic.
Hey, Mike, so we have a question.
Yes.
Which has the bigger performance hit, ESXi swapping out memory on a guest or the guest swapping out in Windows?
That's an interesting question. Without kind of testing, I wouldn't be able to say for sure. Windows does a lot of it anyway through the page file, and it's kind of used to that. If that's happening and it's still within the confines of everything, I would imagine that it's going to be a larger hit taking it through the ESXi host, because it's going to be more than just for the VM side itself. It's going to be on multiples, and you're seeing a slowdown over more VMs.
I guess it'll also depend on how you have your swap file set up in Windows as well.
Mm-hmm. As mentioned, it all depends. So I mean, on an ESXi, if you have swapping set up to SSDs, but in the Windows side, it's still using technically the data store for that. So the data stores might be slower than the SSDs that you have in your host itself. And if that's the case, it could go either way. So it all depends on your setup.
Yep. By the way, you had mentioned vCops earlier. vCops, at least when I was using it a while back, there was a foundation edition. I know now with 5.8, if you don't license it or something like that, it defaults to foundation. So that's also a good way to get started as far as monitoring your environment if you don't have the licenses or the funds to buy full-blown vCops.
Yes. It also is helpful to have a syslog server somewhere set up in your environment. That way, it's not if you don't have something like Login Site. That way, you can point all your logs from all your servers and all of your devices, and they all point to this single syslog server. That way, you have a single point or a single place where you can go to for it. And incidentally, this is what I was going to go to earlier, the hardware status. And this goes ahead and allows us to look at all of the individual components on our host and actually gives us more information on them, whether or not there's an error that is happening.
Yeah, Chris, vMug Advantage subscription would help, but I'm pretty sure you can't use that in production.
So that kind of pretty much takes me to the end. I know I'm quite a bit early on time, but I left that because I figured there would be a lot of questions.
So you're going to break the world's record for shortest vBrownbag?
It's possible. What is the record?
I have no clue, but
half
right
an
now,
hour, right here, right now.
You've done half an hour.
I defy anybody to go ahead and break that. Let's see here. I could go ahead and pull up a logging class that I have.
Sure.
Let's see if I had anything on this particular computer. All right, so I do happen to have the VM support that finished from before, and it is given to us in a tarball. Just go ahead and extract that. Goes ahead and extracts that into a tar file, and then you can go ahead and extract that. This was the folder structure I kind of showed before on the slides. So as mentioned before, going into here, and I didn't actually go ahead and produce one, it looks like, or at least it's not done yet. Oh, well, maybe it is. It didn't actually give me everything. Normally here, I'm going to see things like your VM kernel and that. Commands, this is going to be, as mentioned before, all the really cool commands that you can actually take most of these commands themselves and actually run it on the SSH command line itself as well and produce pretty much the same sort of results. This will go ahead and show you, for instance, Here's all of my HBAs, link states, the IQN associated with it, capabilities, and what actual hardware is running it. You have your VIB list, which is all of your different device drivers and modules that are loaded, and the actual version. These are also very helpful as well. VMware goes ahead and on the HCL has a list of all the hardware and also the supported firmware and software configurations that are available that have been tested to work with it. Over here on the left-hand side is the actual driver name. The acceptance sliver over here is saying, hey, this has been accepted and validated by VMware. And then this is the actual version that you're running as well. If you go ahead onto the VMware website, you can go ahead and then check against this version number here, and it will tell you exactly whether or not you are up to date. And a lot of times with the drivers themselves, unless they've been changed, this is the build number here at the end. You also have, if you are interested in the build number, you can run through here, the VMware-VL. That will go ahead and bring up the actual build number, and also if any updates have been applied to it, or if that's the GA edition, which is the first edition.
Graham actually brings up a good point. This is also a good way to check the firmware for the driver that you have.
Yes. One of the places that you can go for that is the NIC info if you're looking at your network drivers. If you click in there, this will tell you exactly what you have your VM NIC there. This is the E1000 driver that you're using, but also more importantly here's your firmware version, if there was one on the E1000, and also the version of the driver itself. This will also go ahead and show you things such as that receive and transmit packets dropped. As mentioned before, we don't want anything in there. If you had something like a Broadcom or something like that, it would those would show up there. The let's see, where is it? The SM BIOS, I believe it is. Nope, not that one. We'll go ahead and tell you things like, for instance, exactly what hardware platform you're running on. If this was not a nested VM machine and I was running it, say, for instance, on a Dell box, it would show up here as being Dell. It would also say whether or not what server it was, such as an R730 or whatever hardware it was running on, and it would also show you the BIOS version that it was currently running on as well.
So we do have a question.
Yes.
Do we have a way or a view to have centralized viewing regarding CPU, memory, and network, etc.?
What is meant exactly by a central view?
I'm not sure. I would assume in vCenter would be, of course, the only centralized view, but particularly asking around all hosts.
So if you go ahead and go to, say, like for instance, the actual cluster, you can go under monitor and then go over performance, and this is the actual performance for all the hosts that are in that cluster. Now the metrics that it will be able to show you are going to be less and more limited than, say, if you were to drill down to an individual piece of hardware. But this is one of the options that is available to you. So you see CPU cluster services here as far as your effective memory resources and CPU resources, memory, virtual machine operations. So you can see the list that you have available to you is greatly truncated from going ahead and drilling down a little bit to, say, like the host, going into performance, and then looking at the chart itself. Did that go ahead and cover that? A better tool to use for something like that would be going back to VROPS, your vRealize Operations Manager. That's going to give you a lot better and a lot more comprehensive view of what's going on with your environment on a per cluster basis, on a per host basis, you name it. It's very, very comprehensive. So, did that answer that?
Let's see. Well, so far nothing back. Let's see. What is the official new name for VCOPS, VROPS? I had heard something called VROM. It's probably VSOM is what you're thinking of.
Yes. So the official name for that suite right now is called vROPS, or vRealize is the actual full suite. For Operations Manager, it's vROPS. And there's obviously more products that are included in there. You have vRealize Business, you have vRealize Configuration Manager. As far as the vSOM, that is vSphere with Operations Manager. So that there is an addition that you can actually buy, and not to shamelessly plug my employer or anything, but Dell does go ahead and sell that, where you can buy vSphere with ESXi and it also comes with a Foundations version of Operations Manager,
which is still called VCOPS, right?
No, it is vROPS. It
Foundation has changed. You sure?
Yeah, the whole thing's under vRealize now. At least this month.
Okay.
They seem to have a penchant for renaming things. I'm not sure what the next version of it will be called, but currently it is vROPS and vRealize. It's a suite. One of the nice things that they did do, and if I had my actual work machines and that with me, one of the things that they did do with like 6 was they cleaned up a lot of it. So before you had a lot of it was a lot more hassle going through to get to the GUI for VCOPS. Now with 6.0 and above, they've actually incorporated a lot more into the web client itself, and it's a lot more useful and easier to get around. Also, the nice thing about vROPS is they have what's called management packs, which allows other manufacturers such as Dell's Ecologic and Compellent and NetApp and EMC to go ahead and actually include their management packs that it ties directly and really deeply into their hardware. You'll be able to go ahead and view a lot of metrics and be able to have a huge amount of insight into what's going on into your tools and your hardware itself.
Dan Barr just checked, and he states that on the vSphere 6 download pages, it's still called VCOPS Foundation 5.8.5, and he says it's also called VCOPS on the Foundation Exam Blueprint.
Well, I could be wrong. I'm curious though, as well, what they're actually calling it under just the 6.0 page, because he mentioned there it was 5.8.
By the way, I have to mention the word log insight so Larry can drink.
Hashtag log insight. So they have the vRealize suite here, which is log insight, business, automation, operations, operation insight, all that sort of good stuff. And that's generally what you're looking at, what you're spending a lot more money for. But they do have the vSphere with operations management. And let's see if they actually go into it and list what it calls it on this.
It'll be vRealize.
vRealize? Okay.
Yeah, I sell it, so I should know.
I don't directly sell it, but we are actually getting ready to OEM it, and so we're gearing up to support it. All right, so any more questions on that? Now, one of the other things you can go back to is the log browser. And as I don't know how many of us have tried to go to through here, but back in back when you're using the C# client, you can go to system logs, and VM kernel and that don't show up anywhere in here. So when they came out with this, I was kind of actually really happy because hey, I can go to here now, and I can go to the shell, VMK warning, syslog, VM kernel, and everything, and actually pull it up here on the actual individual. And it's actually kind of cool to go through it, and you can filter it and look for specific things. So you don't actually have to pull a VM support if you don't want to. One of the other things that I thought was kind of neat when I was a while ago when I was teaching a troubleshooting class was there actually is a way if your customer is kind of confused and they don't know exactly what's going on, you can go ahead and pull a VM support for an individual host just using a web page that sits off of the host itself. And give me a second, and I will actually give you the collecting diagnostic. I'll give you the URL for it.
You know, another thing you may want to show is the advanced setting to where you go change your syslog on the hosts.
Okay. Take a look at that real quick. So if you go ahead and say, for instance, you want to grab this, I'll go ahead and go and paste this up here, and all I have to do is change that bit right there to 172. Let's see, what did I call? 16. Okay. That'll go here. It'll ask me to log in. This is going to be the login for the box itself, for the actual ESXi host. You'll click that, and down here, you'll see the VM support just go ahead and kick off. Makes it really, really, really simple for the customer.
So we do have a question about logs.
Yes.
Are the logs that are, let's see, are there logs that are not in the web client that are in the C# client? I think they're all the same. It's pulling the same.
So it depends on what you're looking at. If you're actually, like I am here, plugged into the vCenter, then the only logs that it's going to show you underneath this section here are just going to be vCenter logs. Now you can still export system logs and actually include the host and get the logs that way. And if you are taking the C# client here and you go directly into the host, and I'll go ahead and demonstrate that real quick.
But that's just a view. You're still getting the same logs whether you're in the C# or the web client.
Correct. You can get them, but if he was referring to just, for instance, viewing them here.
No, he was referring to more, are there any different logs? If I'm logged into the C# client versus the web client, am I going to find different logs logging into the web client?
And the answer to that's no.
Yep.
You should be able to get the same logs from either one. All right, where were we? We were...
let's see, he's saying VM kernel was not in the client log, and now it's in the web client. I like that, but there are things I can't get to now if only I use the web client.
Yep. What does he mean there's things that he can't get to now?
Oh no. Kyle.
An example, Kyle.
Come on, Kyle. They're the same logs, Kyle. You've been doing this a while, Kyle. Come on. Don't make me unmute you, Kyle. And Kyle just said login site, login site, login site.
Are we looking at the logs for login site itself, or are we looking at the logs of everything else in login site?
No, he's saying move on, move on.
Inception, yes. All right, so as mentioned before, syslog. We can go ahead and actually set up syslog here and all the different options that we have available to us. You know, what kind of log sizes do we want? What kind of rotation? Do we want them in different folders? All that sort of good stuff. Our global, or at least my global log directory right here is set under scratch and log. Now, if I click this here, this goes ahead and creates a different folder for every host. And that might be relatively important to keep things straight. That way you don't have all sorts of things melding in together. Your default size there, 1024 in kilobytes. Default rotation, how many logs do I keep before I go ahead and flip over and start reusing the same names again? That way, you know, do I want to go ahead and fill up my hard drive?
Yeah, those things are crucial. The rotate and the size, that's absolutely crucial. Because if you store it on your vCenter server, you can fill it up real easily.
Yes. And yeah.
I've seen people typically just leave the defaults.
As far as performance in here, yeah, a lot of times you will.
Yeah, I've never messed with anything other than defaults.
Yep.
So this was just the chart options here. You can go through. It looks a little bit different if you go through the C# client. What's nice to go ahead.
Chris was talking about what we just showed, the advanced feature as far as pointing to the logs on the host. He was saying, you know, is this if you don't have login site? This has nothing to do with login site. This is more if you want to point to a centralized log server. This is where you tell your host to point to, because sometimes when you log into vCenter, one of the things it'll gripe about is, hey, your host does not have any place to dump the logs.
Doesn't have persistent storage, and it goes ahead and yelps at you.
Yep.
Now, as far as what I think you might be asking as well, though, is once you go ahead and incorporate log insight into your environment, it will go ahead and automatically grab them. You don't have to go back to the advanced settings and then point it to it. Since log insight is a VMware product, it's going to know to grab it and where to grab the logs at.
And log insight actually has integration with VROPS as well.
It does. Very, very, very powerful tool. One of the things that you can do as well, for instance, I'm kind of jogged my memory a little bit here looking at these performance charts. If you're going ahead and grabbing performance statistics and that through ESXtop or remote ESXtop, you can go ahead and output those to a comma delimited file. And once you do that, you can import them using something like perfmon on Windows and actually get all your sort of nice and pretty graphs and everything that you can show to everybody else. And then, of course, this right here is on a host basis. If I go ahead and drill up to here, then performance is, there we go. Some stuff won't be available because I just turned on the environment about an hour ago. But this will go ahead and show us what's going on. You kind of see the faint line up here. It's gray. You go ahead and hover over it with your mouse. It'll go ahead and show you exactly where and when. And of course, you can go ahead and save these charts out to JPEG, PNG file, or even Excel spreadsheets here as well. And of course, you can pop the window out, so you can go ahead and change stuff inside of the client itself while you're going ahead and still monitoring and seeing what happens. Might be useful if you're doing something like resource limiting with resource pools and that sort of thing. You can kind of see exactly where you're pushing or where you're constrained at. Are you having memory constrainment issues and so forth. All right, well, that actually takes me to 1 minute till. Yes. So I didn't finish in 30 minutes. I am not the first person.
The other thing is I think there's some free training VMware has online that you can take a look at for login site and VROPs.
Oh yeah, tons of information. There's actually an ICM class available as well. Highly recommend that. But if you're just wanting to get your feet wet in the area and you're just kind of looking to try to get a familiarity with it, they have foundation courses that are available on VMware.com that allow you to go into login site and also into all of the vRealize suite and kind of get a feel for it.
Yeah, go to vmware.com/education and over to the right-hand side, there's, I think, free libraries. And I know there's a lot of free stuff there that you can use.
Don't forget the hands-on labs, too.
Yep.
I didn't want to go ahead and put that out there because I wasn't sure if they actually had any of these. I know they've got a lot of the newer products like vSAN, EvoRail, and NSX, but I wasn't sure. So
my only gripe with the hands-on lab was, at least for vSphere 6, it wasn't up to speed to what the bits were. So when you go use the lab, it was actually running kind of beta code versus what we were using now.
Yeah, and unfortunately that was kind of everywhere for a while, up until I think the first or second week of June. Everybody was still doing beta classes with the beta code, which they were GA as of March 12th. So I think it just took them a while to go ahead and rebuild all of the vPods back over again with the new code.
Okay, so they have rebuilt them. It's been a while since I've even looked at it. I mean, as far as the hands-on lab.
I don't know if those specific ones have been rebuilt, but I would say that if they haven't been rebuilt, they will be rebuilt because they'll be prepping those for VMworld. So they're going to want to have everything up to.
Yeah, I know doing and teaching the classes and that the ICM stuff only became ready to go as of like the first week of or the last week of May even. So I mean, it wasn't. There was a definite lag between GA and then when it actually happened, and they had regular classes because I was still waiting to get a hold of the slides.
Okay. Do we have any more questions?
Well, if there's no more questions, or
I don't see any questions on the Twitters. And the GoToMeeting is empty. Chris says, great job. Thank you. Okay. Well, if we don't have any more questions, then I'm going to stop the recording.